Hey guys, Oscar Combs here with the ISO 9001 group with another episode of the ISO show. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the recent quality concerns in aerospace. If we've been paying attention in the news, we've heard things like doors falling off, missing panels. We've heard of plane crashes. We've heard of the CEO at Boeing resigning, and we've even heard of an ex-quality manager at Boeing committing suicide. Should we be concerned about what's going on in aerospace? Let's talk about it. Yeah, guys, there's been a lot of things going on in the aerospace industry. It's been in the news. If you're paying attention, you've heard some of these things. Some of these things don't even make the news. All right, so let's talk about a few things. If you go to the FAA's website, the Federal Aviation Administration's website, you'll find a list of many in-flight incidences. And so they are required to report these things. So let's talk about a couple of them. So on January the 5th, we all heard in the news about the Boeing 737 MAX 9 door falling on the air. I even did a video in regards to that about some of the quality things that we can learn from that incident. On March the 4th, United Airlines Flight 1118 returned to George Bush Intercontinental Airport after the crew reported an engine issue. So they had taken off and then they returned due to engine issues. Then on March the 9th, United Airlines Flight 2137 returned safely to Chicago O'Hare International Airport after the crew reported a possible oil warning light. That's kind of concerning. The engine issue is very concerning also. When you have to take off and then you have to return back around, that's a concern for me. Then on March the 13th, American Airlines Flight 345 landed safely at Los Angeles International Airport after the crew reported a flat tire on the aircraft. What's going on there with the maintenance issues here? On 3/15, United Airlines Flight 433 landed safely at Medford Airport in Oregon. Now listen to this. A post-landing airline inspection. That means they landed, and then after landing, they did an inspection and they found a missing panel. Wow, that's amazing. On 3/11, it was reported by the New York Times that Boeing whistleblower John Barnett was a quality manager who had raised quality concerns at Boeing. He had worked there for 30 years and he was in the midst of a lawsuit and he was doing depositions. They found Mr. Barnett dead by what they believed to be a self-inflicted wound. And then on 3/26, Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun, who I also spoke about in my previous video, and several other executives resigned from Boeing. So now you tell me if there's something not going on in aerospace in general, and also specifically, if you were listening to all of the names that I mentioned, we kept hearing Boeing, United Airlines, and then we also heard Alaska Airlines. So there's also seems to be some bigger things, some macro things, and there could also be some things that are specific to certain organizations. So with all of that, it kind of begs the question, is there something going on here, guys? I mean, I'm a quality professional of 30 years. I've taken a lot of flights, and I've been doing this since 1995, and I haven't seen this many incidences in the news in regards to airlines and plane manufacturers. So we need to ask ourselves, I mean, the airline industry doesn't want to freak us out, but we need to ask ourselves, is there something going on here? Something that we need to be mindful of. So in March, United Airlines announced that it will launch a review of its safety training and procedures. So if something wasn't going on, they probably wouldn't do that. If something wasn't going on, the CEO of Boeing would probably not resign, the CEO and other executives. If there was something not going on, an ex-quality manager involved in a lawsuit against Boeing would not have ended up dead. Now, the airline industry continues to say that air travel is the safest way to travel. Now, I guess if you do some kind of statistical analysis, that may sound good, but it's still not good. It's a flawed thought. It's a flawed way of thinking. Now, of course, they are telling us that because they don't want to alarm the public. But I'm a proponent of using common sense. And when I start seeing things, I start paying attention, and I don't listen to people that tell me not to be alarmed, because my eyes are not lying to me. Those news reports, they're not lying to me. The CEO resigning is not lying to me. The quality manager killing himself, that's not lying to me. Something is going on. Guys, it is the responsibility of plane manufacturers and also the organizations that overhaul those planes, like the maintenance companies, the repair companies. Their job is to ensure airworthiness of the aircraft before it takes off. I don't want to have to turn around because we identified an issue during flight. We should be catching those things before we take off, not while I'm 30,000 feet in the air or 16,000 feet in the air and all these things are happening. That is unacceptable. Now, I can understand why they say, okay, the aircraft is the safest travel, because we really haven't had a lot of major plane crashes here in the US, or shall I say commercial. We are having quite a significant amount of plane crashes that are non-commercial, where 2 people are crashing, 5, 10 people are crashing. You can go to the FAA's website, you can find many of those that are going on. But the last major crash in the United States occurred on Colgan Air Flight 3407. It crashed near Buffalo, New York, killing 49 people on board. That happened on February the 12th, 2009. So I can understand, after 15 years with no major commercial plane crashes here in the US, where the airline industry would kind of make that claim. But although planes are not crashing in the US, doesn't mean that they're not crashing in other countries. On October 29, 2018, 189 people died on a Boeing 737 MAX 8. We may remember that. It was in the news briefly, and then it kind of went away. See, now that happened in Jakarta, Indonesia, only 13 minutes after the plane took off. Now, on March the 10th, 2019, some months later, another Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashed in Nairobi, Kenya. Nairobi, Kenya, guys, only 6 minutes after takeoff, 6 minutes into flight. 157 people died in that flight. That plane was only 4 months old. Okay, so both of these planes were basically new planes. Boeing had installed this new, some kind of software. They ended up issuing a patch to the planes, some kind of software update to rectify this issue. But guys, plane crashes, commercial plane crashes are happening. Just because they didn't occur in the United States does not mean that we should not be alarmed and paying attention. And if we don't want to be alarmed, we should definitely at minimum be concerned. So Boeing Airlines, United Airlines, Alaska Airlines, and others, they've been in the news with all of these quality issues. It's unacceptable when you have these people's lives in your hands for you to not ensure their safety. You know, we understand accidents happen. I'm not saying accidents don't happen, but these are not accidents. A lot of these things are software issues. That's not an accident. People not tightening up screws on doors and doors falling off at 16,000 feet. That's not an accident. Poor maintenance on the planes where the having engine issues and you have to return back to the airport with everybody on board. That's not an accident, guys. In the world I come from, we call those nonconformities. So guys, let's talk about some of the regulatory things and standards around this aerospace industry. So at the highest level, of course, we have the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. Now, their responsibility is to regulate civil aviation. And they develop and administer programs relating to aviation safety. That is their role, that is their mission. So in my opinion, the FAA must be more hands-on with these companies. With all of these things that are going on, it requires more hands-on oversight. You know, after a crash, you always see representatives from the FAA doing investigations, things of that nature. But why can't we be more proactive and be more hands-on before a crash? You know, I'm a big believer that foresight can be 2020. A lot of people say, well, hindsight can be 2020. I'm a big believer that foresight can be 2020 if we just slow down and really pay attention to what's going on here. Now, another organization that we need to also look at is called SAE International. Now, this is the organization that writes all of the standards for the aerospace industry. I'm familiar with SAE International because, you know, we help our clients implement aerospace standards here at the ISO group. Now, this organization stands for SAE International, stands for the Society of Automotive Engineers. Now, I remember a long time ago, I used to think, well, why is the SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers, creating standards for the aerospace industry? I don't have time to get into that today, but that's definitely a topic for another day that we need to kind of delve into that. Now, SAE International, they develop quality management system standards just like ISO does for general industry. So we all are familiar with ISO 9001, and it's developed by an organization called ISO, International Organization for Standardization. So you can think of these aerospace standards as ISO 9001 for the aerospace industry. A couple of the big ones are AS 9100, AS 9120, and AS 9110. Okay, now if we look into AS 9100, that quality management system standard is focused on design, development, those kind of organizations that do design and they manufacture. So like Boeing, they're designing aircraft and they're manufacturing aircraft. So AS 9100 would be applicable to Boeing, okay, and other airline manufacturers or aircraft manufacturers such as Airbus. All right, so that's the standard that kind of establishes standards for that segment of the industry. Then you have the standard AS 9110. Now, AS 9110 is for organizations that provide maintenance and overhaul services, right? So all the organizations that do repair on older planes or even new planes that have come off of the manufacturing floor and have been flown, and then so they need some maintenance, they need some repairs on parts, they need to be overhauled. AS 9110 would be for those type organizations, right? So United Airlines and Alaska Airlines, they would kind of fall into that area because they're doing maintenance on their aircraft, right? And then there's other repair shops that also would be following this standard. And then you have a third standard called AS 9120, which is for distributors of like stock parts. So they also have a standard. So to me, when I look at these three standards, AS 9100, AS 9110, and AS 9120, we really need to work with these organizations that fall within these standards to really make sure that they are following these standards to the T. We can't afford for them to not follow any section of these standards. So in my opinion, it's clear that based upon all of the recent incidences that have been in the news, that we do have quality issues, especially involving those three standards, AS 9100 and AS 9110 and possibly AS 9120 with the parts. All right, so let's talk about some suggestions, because I'm a big believer in providing some recommendations to improve things. All right, so these are some recommendations, and they all are from these three standards. Okay, so I'm not pulling stuff out of out of the air here. All right, so you can go to AS 9100, AS 9110, or 9120, and you'll find everything that I'm talking about. So the first thing is that I believe that this industry is a bit complacent. Now, you won't find complacency in these standards, but it comes under the element of leadership. It's been 15 years since we've had a major crash in the U.S., but I also cited major crashes that are happening in other countries. All right, so we're clear on that. They're not happening in the U.S., But there are minor crashes happening in the U.S. All you have to do is to go to the FAA website, and you'll find those crashes. So this industry seems to be a little asleep at the wheel, or a bit complacent. Now, the definition of complacency is feeling so satisfied with your own abilities, or situations that you don't feel like you need to improve upon. So all I keep hearing is, well, this is the safest way to travel. So to me, that's a signal of complacency. The leaders in this industry need to demonstrate more leadership directly in all three of these standards. AS 9100 and all the other AS standards require top management to not only talk about leadership, but to demonstrate leadership through their examples and demonstrate commitment to the quality management system. So commitment is not just after an accident. See, John Calhoun, I only heard from him after these incidences. That's when his name started really popping up. Now, being proactive and demonstrating leadership and commitment, and he wanted to have a safety stand down. Well, we should be doing all of those things prior to these major incidences, okay? They also need to implement what we call in quality more process approach and process risk-based thinking. It's very important. The process approach, really understanding the inputs and outputs of processes and looking at the risk at the input and also as things are being done and at the output. So really doing a deep dive into process risk-based thinking. It's very important, guys. All organizations in this industry, to me, seems like they really need to do not a safety stand down, but you need to do a quality stand down. Really look at all of your procedures, making sure that we are assessing risk from a process level and making sure employees are not only trained on the procedures, but they are following the procedures and that the procedures are indeed effective. And I would recommend more supplier audits for this industry. All right, so we really need to focus in those areas. Okay, so my next recommendation is in regards to more customer focus. The standard, all three of these standards and all of the other standards, they require customer focus. Now, typically when we think about customer focus, and what I see in this industry is that the focus is on the paying customer. So in this example, Boeing would be making a plane for United Airlines. So the customer in this case would be United Airlines. So there is a lot of focus from that perspective, with those two interested parties. But what I don't see a lot of even in these standards is a focus on the indirect customer, which are the crew and the passengers on the plane. I don't see that in the standards, and I don't in the contracts that I've reviewed in this industry. I don't see that explicitly listed. So we need to put more emphasis on the indirect customer as opposed to just the direct customer. It's very important, guys. The indirect customers are the ones paying with their lives when things go wrong. Next point is that this industry needs to focus more on risk-based thinking. Okay? Now, this is something that was introduced by ISO 9001-2015 and has been incorporated in all of these standards. So the concept is still relatively new. Now, be assured that this industry does a lot of risk assessment. They do FMEAs, they do risk assessments, validations, and all of these things, but primarily on a product level. There's a lot of engineering that goes into all of these aircraft. So I'm not saying that, we have issues in this area, but we do have issues at the process level. And the process issues are, from what I can see, are causing all of these other concerns that are making the news. So put more emphasis on risk at the process level. Like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I typically see people disregard assessing risk in their processes and only focus on the product. Even when it comes to nonconformities, they focus on the production floor, but they don't focus on the processes that are causing the nonconformities on the production floor. I see this all the time. So what we need to do is focus again at the process level, procedural level. Look at the risk from that perspective, or look at the risk within processes. Look at the risk within the procedures. So if we look at all these things that are going on in the news, they refer to them as safety issues. No, these are quality failures, quality escapes that have caused safety issues. See, the safety issue is just an output of a poor process, or risk that is in a process that has not been properly mitigated. Okay. So if you look at not tightening a screw on a door, that's not an engineering issue. That's a process issue. That's a people issue. If you look at poor maintenance on an engine, and the crew has to turn around and come back, that's not a product issue. That's a process issue. Or if you look at an issue where low oil on a plane that causes the pilot to have to turn around because the oil is low in the engine, that's a process issue. So you can see how these process issues can cause safety issues. Safety is just an output. So we cannot afford just to look at all of these things, again, from a product perspective, from an engineering perspective, more risk analysis on product. And no, guys, we have to really look at this from a process issue, procedural issue, personnel issue, competency issue, training issues. These are all, you can roll it all up into process issues, guys. I'm confident that this industry is focused on safety for all of those flying, the crew, passengers. I'm convinced that they're focused on that. But we cannot afford for the leaders in this industry not to get this right. They have to really time out and see what's going on. We cannot afford for things to get any worse, guys. We just can't afford it. So guys, let me know what you think about what's going on here in the aerospace industry. You've heard all of these things just like I have in the news, right? Drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on it. Let me know what you think is going on in this industry. Take a second to subscribe to our channel, like this video, follow us, share this video with someone that you think could benefit from it. Oscar Combs here with the ISO 9001 group, helping organizations improve their operations and reduce their risk. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.